Okay, October wrap up. This is what we got for you. I have quite a few books that I can haul if I have time. I actually ended up reading a lot more than I thought, and I wanted to do an update on what's going on with this month, so we'll see. As of today, I'm still working on Everything is Just Beginning by Erin Bartels. This is, I think, September's Chantal book. I'm working on The Blooming of Delphinium. Hilarious so far. This one it's part of the Moonberry Lake series. This one is where Delphinium owns a florist shop, and she's all of a sudden, all these people from the retirement home are coming to play poker in her cooler. And everything goes from there. It's pretty funny. So I'm having a lot of fun with it. We shall see what happens, but there's those. I don't really have anywhere to put stuff. I'm working on The Brothers Karamazov. I'm on chapter 5, I think. So we're not very far in, but surprisingly, a really easy read so far. I mean, it's long. It's like on 1.3, I think I'm doing 1.2, 1.3, something like that. Because my narrator is really slow. Sorry about the cars. But it's 27 hours or something like that. It's over 30 at normal speed. So there's a lot in it, but so far it's reading really accessible is the only word I can think of. It's just, I don't want to say it's an easy read, but it's not this complex. I can't follow the plot. I got to reread and all the stuff that I expected. I really thought it was going to be difficult because of my experience with Tolstoy's War and Peace, where I remember Zippo, so clearly I didn't understand what I was reading. There's that. I remember it was long. Does that count? Does that count? War and Peace was long? Yeah? I remember that? Yeah. That's it. And I'm only a little bit into Miracles, but I think I'm on like chapter 2 or 3 or something. Really enjoying it. I love how Lewis makes really, I would say difficult topics. Miracles are difficult. So he makes them just really, I don't want to say ordinary, but you don't feel like you've got a lecturer talking to you. It's like you're sitting down with a friend, you're having a chat, and they're explaining something that you might not understand. So that's always one of the nice things about him. But he has this poem in here at the beginning. But, the first 3 stanzas I really got. Among the hills, a meteorite lives huge in moss is overgrown in wind and rain, with touches light made soft the contours of the stone. Okay, I'm getting this, right? But then we get all that is earth has once been sky. Down from the sun of old she came, or from some star that traveled by too close to his entangling flame. Hence, if belated drops yet fall from heaven, yet her plastic power still works as it once worked on all the glad rush of the golden shower. I had no idea what those last 2 verses are saying. I'm lost. I'm totally lost. So if you understand the last 2 verses of this poem, please tell us. I can't be the only one who doesn't get that. The first 3, total sense. Last one, not so much. So that's what I'm reading right now. I think I'm going to go with physical books first, just get them out of the way, and then finding my things will make more sense, right? So first up, I finally finished The Curate of Glaston, which has 3 books in it. I love how I started this, way back in like February. I got all these very autumnal looking tabs, all my little marks, and I'm loving it. There were 2 I wanted to read you. The Baron's Apprentice. So for this book, I'm going to say the first book was my absolute favorite. The third book was a very close second. And then the third book, the second book I really loved, but not nearly as much as these 2. If I hadn't read these 2, it would have been an instant 5-star, which is why I made myself give it all 5-star, because it's just really not fair to compare like that. So you make a book go on its own merit, not on everything around it. And that's how I do things. But every once in a while, I get myself caught up in this thing. So, but there were a couple of things that I was reading near the end. I was like, oh, I want to share that, because George MacDonald puts so much depth in his books. And so let me take this off. I put extra little tabs so I'd be able to find them this time. I thought that was smart of me. Don't expect it again. I love the idea that, you know, our joy isn't just in the Lord, but in his will. We often kind of treat the Lord's will as a burden, and yet how can the Lord's will be a burden, right? So it's like, I loved it. But then it says, so the Baron is talking to his son, and he says that the curate of Wingfield, Thomas Wingfield, the curate of Glaston, if you listen to him, you wouldn't like it. You'd be at your prayers all day. And then the curate says, Sir Wilton, it doesn't take time to thank God. It only takes eternity. I love that. I was like, yeah, it doesn't take time. Thanking God exists outside of time. And I was just like, and what a great way to end, you know. I mean, technically, I think I may have finished this in like the first day of November. I don't remember, but I'm counting it for October because I want to put it away. You know, I mean, just finally get to put this book away. So there was that one. I loved it. I think I might do a separate video just talking about all the things that are in there, because there's so many things to get from that book. But for the most part, the greatest thing is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and your neighbor as yourself. That's that book. Everything in there centers on that, and it's so beautiful. What I really loved is that Richard was brought up in a faith that is rooted outside the love of God and only in the law of God. And he doesn't have a respect for God. He doesn't believe in God. He doesn't want to have anything to do with faith, religion, anything. And then he meets Jesus. And he starts to see that what he had been taught was, you know, just like that through the glass darkly kind of thing. He wasn't taught the whole gospel. He was only taught the peripherals that aren't at the core of Jesus loves you and died for you. He is what this is about, not you. And so when he learns that, he actually develops just this really neat faith. And it's not something you always see in 19th century fiction. And yet it was beautifully, beautifully done there. And then, The Heart of the Family, which is the last of the Eliot trilogy. I loved it up until, I'm going to say the last third to quarter. And I felt like it kind of fizzled out there. And Googe didn't do with this one what she does so well. She takes situations that are wrong and allows her characters to become that wrong, if you will. She allows her characters to embrace wrong. You know, in The Scent of Water, this woman falls in love with a married man, and that's wrong. And the woman knows it, and she works between her and the Lord through this problem of hers, and doesn't make things uncomfortable. She never goes to the man. She doesn't make things uncomfortable with him, with his wife. She just continues her friendship and her love for the Lord, and just leaves it in his hands, and has to work through the fact that this is a reality, that this happens, and doesn't make it right, but it is real. And she kind of shows how you can live through it victoriously. Well, she does that in the first book in this one, and a little bit again in the next book in this series. But in Heart of the Family, I don't want to say that that drops off, because that's not true. But it does, it's almost like she wanted to show how that can work out in all kinds of situations and just kind of went too far. It just wasn't as good. And that was kind of sad. I had to turn the light on. It was getting a little dim in here. So, okay. I want to make sure that there aren't, people are getting off work now, so it's going to get noisy. Sorry. So there's this prayer, and he says, lying in bed a little later, the words of an old prayer that he used to pray and had forgotten came to him. Take, O Lord, from our hearts all jealousy, indignation, wrath, and contention, and whatsoever may injure charity and lessen brotherly love. Have mercy, O Lord. Have mercy on those that crave thy mercy. Give grace to them that stand in need thereof, and grant that we may be worthy to enjoy thy grace and attain everlasting life. Okay, nice prayer, right? But then it says, he said the prayer several times to himself, as he sometimes said lines of poetry, merely to drug himself with the beauty of the words. Then he found he was really meaning what he said, praying as he would have prayed in the days of his childhood when, as children do, he had held his parents' faith without question. I loved it because it speaks to what I found to be true of prayers in like the Book of Common Prayer or other, like Jane Austen's prayers and things. They aren't, at first they don't always really sink in. Sometimes they do at first and then they become a little rote or whatever, and then they sink in again later. But that's kind of the point. It's kind of the point. You say it till you mean it, kind of thing. It's kind of like apologizing when someone keeps hurting you. You keep forgiving, even when it's hard, until you know you mean it, because you have to. Forgiveness is not an option for the Christian, and so it was really cool. So they're talking about having this child pray, and this is one of the children. One of the children says, he's so young, grandmother. He doesn't know any words. And it says, words are unnecessary in prayer, said Lucilla. Reverence is. Kneel up, Robin. Shut your eyes and hold your hands. And I was like, yeah, we don't always have the words, but reverence, we can have reverence. And so that was a really good little reminder. It wasn't, again, this wasn't my favorite of the series. The first two, the first one made me mad, but it was probably the best. But the second one had that true moment where Nadine really has this total moment of yes. We're totally going to, I'm giving my whole heart into my marriage, not just taking my heart away from someone who shouldn't have it. And that was beautiful in the second book. In this one, I did love getting to know Sebastian. Sebastian is, he comes to work for David, one of the Elliots, as a secretary, and there's some trouble there, and he has a faith journey to like resume, and there was a lot of beautiful stuff in here, but compared to the first two, it just wasn't my favorite. Then I finished the Eustace Diamonds, and okay, this book, Lizzie Eustace was a very young wife of a much older man, and she married him for his money. And when he figures this out, he still left her very well off. He died, and he left her, I think it was $4,000 a year and the use of this castle in her lifetime. And upon his death, she had this diamond necklace, and the necklace is considered by the family, or at least the family's lawyer, to be an heirloom belonging to the family for the use of the ladies of the family for their lifetime, but it doesn't belong to them. And she considers it her property. She is a conniving, manipulative, horrible person. I consider Lizzie Eustace to be like a blend of Scarlett O'Hara at her worst, with none of O'Hara's virtues, because Scarlett O'Hara did have some virtues, but at her worst you have Scarlett, and then mix her with like Becky Sharp from Vanity Fair, And that's Lizzie Eustace, all the worst of both. I've really truly found nothing redeeming about her. There is no remorse, repentance, nothing. Zippo, nada, nothing. She's just a horrible person. There's really no other way to put it. And this is the entire chronicle of her life with those diamonds and everything that happens. And it was an interesting story, but mostly because you really love to hate Lucy, and you get to see how what she does affects people that you've known from all the books. But that's pretty much its only thing. I think I gave it 4 stars, and that was probably because it was, in my mind, it's really more like 3.5. I didn't love it, didn't hate it. You know, it was okay, but a little better than okay. So it was almost 4 stars, but not quite. So I think I gave it 4. But that was that one. So I'm getting close. I've got 2 more to go. It was good because that was September's book, and then for October I have Phineas Redux. So this one, it's like him. He's back. His. I wonder if that's a spoiler. It's first thing in the page, but his wife is dead. They have no children. He's back in London and back in Parliament. That's really most of the political stuff in this, which is really nice because I was getting really tired of it, and I'm really nervous because this month is the Prime Minister, so we're back to Parliament again. But anyway, so there's this one. In this one, Phineas, he has a lot of troubles and trials, but he also grows up a lot. So he's like 40 now, and he's not as fickle in his admiration of people as he was. He's not as, in Phineas Finn, he was definitely in love with Lady Laura, and then she marries someone else, and so he falls for her friend, and she marries someone else, and he, all along, he had this girl back home who thinks that he cares about her. He was just really, all over the place, and one woman loved him in that book, outside of his gal back home. And then in this one, he has chances with people again, and he doesn't take them, and that's good. In Phineas Finn, we had the whole Lady Laura and her husband thing, where her husband, when I read the book, I was totally on her husband's side. He asks very little of her, mostly for he was a firm Sabbatarian. I believe he's Scottish, so that would explain the Presbyterian. He's a firm Sabbatarian, and he wants Sunday to be reserved for God. That's what he wants his family to be. And she just doesn't like anyone telling her what to do at all. And he wasn't overbearing about it. He just made a request, and when she kept using excuses like, I have a headache, so I can't go to church. Well, he wants a doctor to see her because you're getting lots of headaches. And then she takes that as oppression. And the way it was written in that book, I was behind him 100%. She was being a twit. She was being really ridiculous. And what is your problem? You married this guy. You knew who he was. None of this is a surprise to you. Why are you suddenly being such a jerk? Because you knew you made the wrong decision? Well, that's not his fault, And so I was totally behind him. And I could tell the author, Trollope, wants us to sympathize with her. And I couldn't. Absolutely could not. And it actually gave me some ideas because she leaves him. And he wants to use the law to force her to come home. And I didn't know that that was a doable thing. So in this one, she is living in Dresden, and the law is not forcing her to come home, and she refuses to come home. And then we see a side of Mr. Kennedy, or Lord Kennedy, or whatever Kennedy. We see a side of him that is very, very different than we saw in the first book. He kind of goes a little mad, and I don't know if Trollope is trying to show what happens, and maybe he wasn't that way, but this focus on, what Trollope considers to be excessive devotion to religion, if you will. I mean, you could tell that he considers the man's just
commitment to what he believes to be fanatical. And I think he's trying to show that it can unbalance the mind, and that's where the whole story goes. But then, on top of it, we have Lady Eustace is back, and she has new troubles that are really awful. And then there is someone who is he's antagonizing Phineas. Okay, I'm just going to put it that way. He antagonizes Phineas, and Phineas doesn't like it and stands up to him and gets a little over offended. Okay, his good, wise friends are telling him, hey, just don't go there. And he does. And that's not so good. But then that person is murdered, and there are two people who look guilty, Phineas being one, and he goes to trial. And then it's just the whole story of everything and the bitterness that he embraces and then has to work through. I was not expecting to like this book, but I liked it a lot. I think I gave it 4 stars, and it was a solid 4, maybe closer to 4.5. I mean, I really liked it. And I know part of it, this is why it didn't go to 5. I know part of it is because it is so much better than I expected. And because things that I didn't like and understand about Phineas Finn kind of came to the forefront and was worked through in this one. So it was good, and I'm really glad I read it, and I'm looking forward to some more by him. Everything else I read, for my ebook, and oh my goodness, I forgot. Yeah, we're not going to do we are not going to do a book haul. It's not going to happen because I'm not going to have time when I go through challenges. I forgot about that part. But so for the ebook that I read this month, I had to read an ebook for my own challenge, right? I read Kistletoe Misses, and this book is by Joanne Markey. So I was reading this book. She sent it to me as an ARC, and I was reading it, and I was cracking up through the whole thing. She put some depth into it. She really explored the idea of people who have convictions that they place on other people that really aren't theirs, that maybe they don't apply to themselves. So she has this ex-fiance who was really staunchly pushing we need to be an example to the young people of purity in a relationship. So she got behind that. And then he more and more started controlling more and more and more and more and more. A little bit like what happened to my Lita in Advent, where everything became just a tighter control, and it wasn't healthy. But she kept ignoring family and friends. She's got a big family of cousins, and they're hilarious. Their banter is great. All these cousins, and it's just so much fun. But she got to the point where she's ignoring their cautions and warnings and just following this guy blindly until she sees him kissing someone else. And then the engagement is off. She's devastated. She's like in this depressive mode when she gets a letter from her grandma saying, I want you to come and I want you to learn how to run our Christmas village. And this is going to be the thing, right? Let's just say, wow, right? So on the way, one cousin is determined to give her a makeover, and she's like, no, and then they've decided that she's going to meet herself this lumberjack dude with an axe, smelling, with a beard and smelling of, pine tar. And she's going to be, and they keep joking about her being the holiday heroine. And she's like, I'm holiday babe. And it's kind of like this, it was a joke, but it's kind of like you see this tiny little switch in her at that moment where she has just decided, I am shoveling off the old and embracing the new. And then it goes through the story of her meeting this guy Soren, and it's Joe and Soren, and he's a really neat character. And this, what feels a little bit like an insta love kind of thing, really isn't. And so there's lots of stuff going on in it, but it's funny. Oh my goodness, it's funny. So the entire book, they're joking about this relationship like it's some Hallmark movie or Hallmark style book, and they make a joke about kissing at one point. She's like, that's not till chapter 4. And so then later, you're going along and it's like, oh, I could use some chapter 4 about now. It was really funny. I had so much fun. It's definitely rom-com. And there's a lot of romance in it, but there's a lot more to it than the romance. And again, that's my form of romance. I love it when it doesn't take itself too seriously. And so, yeah, I loved that. Had a lot of fun. Have I reviewed it on Goodreads yet? I think I have, but I better check because I can't have because it wasn't on my list. So, goody, I get to add another book. Woohoo! But anyway, so I read that as an ebook. I don't think I read any other ebooks, but I have a lot of audios to go through. So I'm gonna open this up and we're gonna flip through my audios. First up is The Lord of Cold Compton. And this is another Miss Busby mystery by Karen Baum-Menuhin and Zoe somebody. I don't know. It doesn't say, so I'm not gonna fight it. But there's somebody else as well who writes with her. And in this one, I kind of got a little bit of a flicker of faith, if you will. Miss Busby has started to sing in the church choir, and it seems to have revitalized her personal faith. That it's just barely mentioned and moved along. This is not Christian fiction, but I like the fact that they acknowledge that this can happen, and I thought that was pretty cool. So there was that. But this story was really different. Her friend, and I don't remember what her name is, if it's Agatha or Adelaide or it's something like that. But her friend shows up and says, there's been a murder. We need to investigate. And it's like, wait, what? We don't know these people. No, I'm not involved in this. This is not going to happen. And this gal is determined. She is bored and she wants something else to do. And the next thing you know, they're tootling off to this cult place of Cold Compton, I think it's called. And because that's what it's called, the Lord of Cold Compton. So Cold Compton's the place, and because Miss Busby was a school teacher, they go off to the school teacher and they're going to have a conversation with her, and they meet some characters along the way. And the murder is off. Something's not quite right, and there's a nurse who knows something about the family that is kind of struggling. And the village obviously knows something, and then they've seen stuff, and then the scene isn't right. And you bring back in our Scottish detective again, our brooding Scottish detective, and you learn some things from him, and it just goes through. I knew the secret. That was obvious from the minute we hear about a person who knows something. Once we know who that person is, I knew what the secret was. It was totally obvious. And I don't think the authors were trying to hide that. But I won't say anything in case I just think like they do. Why ruin it for someone? But then there was also, in my mind, if that's the case, it is too obvious that this person here could have done it, or this person here. So then who was left? Well, there were other peripheral people, but for the most part, it left it down to one of two people. And when one of those people died, it was clear to me, without a doubt, and it was my stronger point. It was pretty easy to figure out, but it was complicated enough, and that it was fun. But on top of that, I loved seeing her friend. I'm going to call her Adelaide, but I don't think that's right. It just starts with an A. But I'm going to call her Adelaide because I want to keep thinking about it. Her friend was a hoot because she is so abrasive and so pushy and so determined to just have her way and to plow in and make people talk. And which is not the best way most of the time, right? And yet there's this moment where she and a suspect connect, not romantically, just in a mutual appreciation that started off bad. And you kind of get to see behind who she is a little. And it was just such a neat characterization. I loved it so much. That alone, even if I hadn't cared about the rest of the book, unless it had been just horrible, that would have given it 5 stars because that was so well done. I just loved it. I loved it. And then I read Benedict Brown's Blood on the Banisters. This one, oh my goodness, guys. So we've been seeing Albert, Christopher I think his last name is Prentice. And his grandfather is Lord Edgington. We've seen his brother Albert from the beginning as this bumbling buffoon, and he pretty much is. He's just shallow and a little foppish, and you can't figure out. And he's falling in love with people left and right. He's several years older than Christopher, and so it's really kind of cool because he really makes Christopher look brilliant, even as Christopher hasn't really come into his own. But he does this thing, and it's so good. It's so good. So he's getting married, and all the men go. Grandpa, I don't think the dad went. I don't think the dad was there. Why wasn't the dad there? But Grandpa, Christopher, and Albert all go to the bride's home the night before the wedding. They're going to get married there. They all go to the bride's home, and they all spend the night together as kind of a sort of a bachelor party thing. And all the women are supposed to be with Christopher's mother, but the mom doesn't go. The bride's mom doesn't go. She stays at that house and then is killed. I mean, that's pretty obvious from the synopsis. But this is where things got really interesting, because everybody's reactions were totally off the wall. Albert looks 100% guilty. He's got blood on himself, on his shirt, on his bed. There's blood obviously on the banister, right? There's it just, everything points to him, which is, even if we didn't know that it can't be him, because we know who he is and there's no reason for this. I mean, the motivation is so minor and just like understated. You're like, no, just no. No. So there was that. But even without that, it just, I don't know how to say something without giving stuff away. But it was really fascinating. And I've had this thought before in the books, but I couldn't be sure what was going on. Well, then everything kind of switched up, and we're reading along, and all of a sudden I go, oh my Grady. I knew who it was. I knew what was going to happen. I knew the things. And I was like, I don't think I can take this. I was so upset because of what was going to come. And I was right. And it's why you can read these mysteries as standalones. You can. But this is why I like to read books in order, because you do get some of those underbelly. It's kind of like watching Doctor Who. You can watch an individual episode and it's pretty great. But if you watch like all the Bad Wolf time, if you watch them in order, you see the progression. I kept asking my kids, what's this Bad Wolf? What does that mean? And they just kind of brushed me off. And then all of a sudden they're like, yeah, this is here a lot. You know, it was that kind of thing. Well, that happens in series where you've got these little things that are slowly pulling together, and then you have this moment, right? And so I was like, argh! But yeah, but better than seeing it all come together. Albert, he's not a different person than he was. He's still Albert. But he has matured in this one in a way that was so beautiful. It was so neat. I loved it. I'm curious to see what Brown's going to do with Albert in the future. I hope he doesn't lose that maturity and because he's still going to be Albert. I mean, if he turns him into, just a stark raving genius who is serious and not, shallow and falling for every girl, then Brown has lost his mind, and but I don't think that's going to happen. So that was good. It was really, 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 really good. Then I read books 3 through 7 of, what's it called? Harry Potter. I listened to them on audio, and it was really neat to kind of get to go back. And someone, maybe Candlewick Library, I can't remember who did it, but somebody, when I mentioned that I wasn't going to do a review for each one because, and they said, well, maybe just, one little thing you took away from it. And I was like, that I can do. And so I actually did that on Goodreads, because apparently I haven't actually reviewed the books, Well, I was not going to go through a big old long spiel. Maybe sometime I'll add to it. But this time around, particularly with the Azkaban, it's what really kicked off noticing things. And so it was really kind of cool that, you know, whoever it was, I feel like it was kind of like, anyway, whoever that was, when they said, you know, just the one takeaway, well, that's the book that I had that first notice. I noticed something, and I wasn't going to say, but I am going to say. So if you don't want any spoilers for the whole series or whatever, you might want to skip these. But I noticed something about the Dementors and knowing about who Harry is and what has happened to Harry and everything. And I realized the Dementors being so focused on Harry might have a lot to do with that last Horcrux than I realized before. I had missed that connection, that if they are seeking, do you see what I mean? I'm just gonna leave it there because it was just so cool. So I really did get a lot more out of these books. I also noticed that this one is where I see the biggest and the beginning of the biggest divergence between the story arcs from books and movies. Here is where it kind of really begins. There were some little bits in the first ones, but they stayed fairly close-ish to the book story arcs. But in this one, the Azkaban, you see the movie arc kind of diverging a little bit. Because the books and movies have slight divergences in their story arc. It's not the exact same arc. It's related, but they do diverge. And so I think I could see it starting here. And I thought that was really cool. Okay, then The Goblet of Fire. In my review, I was like, "Hello, Spew, my old friend," because it was neat to get to go back to that one. But I think this time, when I was reading it, I noticed something that I didn't notice the first time at all. And the first time I read it, it was long before I saw the movies, so it wasn't movie influenced, but it is so focused in a lot of ways on the tournament that you miss the fact that there is a way more to this book than the tournament. And this time it really jumped out and showed. And I think the fact that I have seen the movie where it's pretty much all focused on the tournament, that makes a big difference. But there's a lot. You've got the House Elf rebellion that Hermione is really working hard. You see Hermione kind of becoming who she is in her soul, kind of being able to bring that out a bit. We get to see Ron, and up until now, Ron hasn't really shown a lot of frustration at always being second to everyone, right? But we didn't get to see that, but it starts to really show up here, and we start to really see that Ron has always felt like just kind of the tag along, and now here he's more of a tag along still. And it was kind of neat, in my opinion, to be able to see all that kind of change. Well, then additionally, we get to see more of the history of the world, of Harry himself, of everything. There's a lot. All right. I don't have time. I've got to cook us some dinner soon, so I'm just going to keep going. But so there was that. And then, so now I've gotten like sidetracked. So the point being that there's just a lot of world building and stuff forming and starting to mushroom out from this one, and it's not just the Triwizard, and I thought that was really cool. Also, there was one thing I thought was really neat. Now, I love the fact that in the books, Dobby is the one who comes up with the Gillyweed. I do. But I thought that the movies, moving that, as much as I missed having Dobby in the Goblet of Fire in the movies, I thought that them choosing Neville to be the one to provide the gillyweed was a brilliant, just showing of, who Neville is, yes. But it's also some really brilliant foreshadowing, because you start to see that there is more to Neville than you ever had any idea, and here it comes. And it's like his very, very, very first step is when he's going to stop them from, getting the house in trouble again. But this is that's like a baby step. This is like the very first line drawn in the sand. You don't know it. He doesn't know it. But by focusing on helping Harry with that, and by not taking offense to Harry's snappishness and stuff, and just, that moment of, in the movie, I killed Harry Potter, those things, it just shows who Neville's going to become. And it was some brilliant foreshadowing that I've never noticed until I read the book this time. So I thought that was really kind of cool, something different. So the first time I read this book, I gave the Half-Blood Prince 4 stars. And I kind of feel like I felt like I was being generous. I really had a lot of problems with the book the first time I read it. I didn't like Dumbledore's distance. I didn't like the way it felt like he was using Harry. I didn't feel like it had any hope or strength or anything. It just felt like the book was a means to the next one, as opposed to telling a story in itself. And I just realized I've skipped the Order of the Phoenix. We'll go back to that. Anyway, so there was that. But this one, there was so much more to it than I understand. Once you've read the whole series and you know the story arc, you see what was happening and why it was happening and why what was being done was being done. You see it so much richer, and then you understand. Whereas before, it's kind of, it didn't do that. I'm not going to go into the before because I was wrong. So what's the point? Also, in this one, you kind of get that. Rowling gives us that darkness before the dawn, that the darkness and the bleakness, and then what happens when the light comes, and you get that showing of it, but also that emphasis on where is the source of your strength, and and that you get from this potions book, where he's learning from someone who has gone before and learned. But you don't know, he's doing things, but he doesn't know where that's from. And that's dangerous. Hermione is right. But on the other hand, the problem isn't that he's learning from it. The problem is he's unwilling to investigate in case it's something he shouldn't be learning from, and he knows it. So he knows the right thing to do, and he's not doing it. And we'll just throw a little James 4:17 out there and leave it, But it was a lesson that I missed the first time I read it, and it was just so very good. Okay, so for the Order of Phoenix, now we can go back a book. For the Order of Phoenix, this is where I feel like there were some dark themes in Goblet of Fire, but it still felt like upper middle grade to me. This one is where it blends really into the YA, because even though they are younger, they're like middle teens. They're not, 17 or above. They're not there yet, but they're having to make much older decisions. They're having to make adult decisions. They're having to come into their own and decide, what is important to them. They're having to become who they're going to be in this book. And so that was like the biggest takeaway for me, is that this is, and it's interesting because I think they're 15 in this one. Up until about the age of 15, because I remember where I was, up until about that age, I did the right thing because I didn't want to get in trouble. And I knew I would get in trouble. If not with mom and dad, it would be with God. And I didn't want to get in trouble. But sometime around the age of 15, is when I started doing things because I knew they were right and I wanted to do what was right. Not just so I wouldn't get in trouble, but because it was right. It was around that time, and I wonder if there is something about 15 that I've never really noticed, but now I really want to like study the brain and understand, does anything happen around that time? You know, I don't know, but it was something I noticed and I really enjoyed about this book. But yeah, this is where I think it definitely moves into YA. And is this the book where Ron ends up with a really pathetic girlfriend, or is that the 6th? I can't remember. But that was dumb. Can I just say that was the 6th. That was just really dumb. Just so very dumb. Finally, the last book of the series, book 7, The Deathly Hallows. That one, I know I gave it 4 stars initially. I bumped it up to 5 this time. 5 this time. I wanted to say up to 7 because it's book 7. What's wrong with me? But I did bump it up because I think I rated it too soon after reading it, and I hadn't had time to let it all process and all the things. There were things that I didn't like at first because I hadn't really thought about it. But the more I mostly things I felt like were missing rather than what was there. I'll give it that. But I don't think it was. I think that I read it too literally across the page without letting the nuances sink in, without really paying attention to the subtext. There's a lot in this book, and she did a really great job of like bringing it all together. So, with that said, I think what I got out of it this time more than anything else is the full circle. So book 1 begins sort of, we learn that Harry's mother sacrificed herself and for her love of her son, and it protected him, and it set him apart to do great things to prevent this again, right? This is like the whole premise of the book, that love is the greatest form of magic. So there's that. So then you go all the way through the series and you get to the end, and there's that moment when Molly Weasley steps in front of her daughter and goes after Bellatrix, who is like the Voldemort of the women, if you will. And, so it's like this battle, and she, says, "Not my daughter," bleep. And it's one of the few times that I've cheered at an expletive. I'm going to say it was appropriate. It was genius, but it brought that whole thing full circle. It's like, no, I'm going to protect my kid. It takes it all the way, but it's also a picture. Her doing that is also a picture of kind of what the whole wizarding community was doing. They were saying to Voldemort just before they just obliterated him, they were saying, "Not our world, you jerk." And it was like a cutoff. I don't know if it was just that I'm in a different place in my life right now. I don't know if it's because the whole menopause things is making me much more emotional than I have been. But I choked up 10 times more this time in this one with many things. I choked up, obviously, over deaths and injuries of beloved characters. Yes. But there were even things like Lupin and Harry's reactions with him. That hurt so much. And watching Molly and all of her fears coming to fruition, and just what it puts you through as a mother to see not just your children in danger, but the world they're going to grow up in. That got me big time. Obviously, again, the obvious deaths, they were rough, but in a different way. The first time, like, one of the most beloved characters who died, when I read it the first time, it was my loss for the character that I grieved. I wanted more of that character. This time, with all these years and all the different discussions that people have had about the different characters, this time for me, it was, and it's choking me up to think about it, it was the people left behind without that character. And I was like, oh man. Hagrid, when he sees Harry dead, that just killed me. I was like, oh my gravy. What are we going to do now? I mean, it was so bad. It was just so hard, so good, so bad, all the things. It was a much better book. Before I know I don't remember why I chose 4 instead of 4.5, 3.5. I don't know anything about that. I just know that there was 4, and I know that I didn't really see all the things. I know that. This time I had a really hard time with the fact that I could only give it 5, because the more I think about it, the more that I process it, the better the book is. Do I love the epilogue? No. But I don't think, I mean, looking at from an author's viewpoint, Rowling didn't have the option not to do what she did. It's like she can't win on that one, because we don't see the story from that last day at Hogwarts to the first day of this kid going to school. We don't see everything that brought things about to that point. And because we don't see it, we don't necessarily understand it. But if we don't have it, then we feel like we were cheated. She can't win. So there was that. So let's look at challenges. Okay, so for Chantal Reads All Day's Cozy Cottage Challenge, I'm going to go through the prompts and say if I read a book or did the thing or both or neither. Okay, just going to plow through this thing. So the first one was Rainy Day, and it's like physical or book. Well, we didn't have rain here in the desert, so there was no physical rainy day. Didn't happen. I read books that took place in London. I read books, the Harry Potter books, they had rain. So I read a book with rain. We're going with that. It was like next to a fireplace. There are fireplaces in the Trollope books. I don't read, but I also made sure I turned on my little fireplace. I just didn't turn the heat part on, so I could see the flames and dancing while I was reading. So I have my fireplace. Then it's like with a blanket, absolutely. I bought for the Shedifus this fall, I bought this super cozy, just squishy blanket, and there was one night it was so cold, and so I definitely pulled that out, and I was like, hey, this counts for Chantal. So that one, I knew as I was doing it that this was for that, so that was that. Under the trees, I was out under our trees, but I didn't actually read, but I did go spend a lot of time under our Chinaberry trees, just really examining. It was really kind of strange. Yikes, I'm just dropping stuff everywhere. Our Chinaberries this year, usually these are yellow. They're very, very yellow. And then they fade into a pale thing. But this year they were green. I mean, this is really green. And I'm not quite sure why, but it is. And I just thought it was interesting. So I picked some. So I spent a lot of time out literally under the trees. But I didn't actually read under one. But there were definitely trees in books. And the Heart of the Family, they spend time under the trees too. So there was that. Fresh baking. Yes, I did fresh baking. I baked rolls for my daughter's birthday to go with the baked stew. So it was baked rolls and baked stew. In the dark, I always read in the dark, obviously out here with my thing, but I read in the real dark because I walk at like 2:33 in the morning. I do a 2-mile walk, and so it's really dark, only have the street lights, and in some places they're not on, and I just have my audiobook going. So I did both physically and the dark themes and stuff that happened in the Harry Potters. I would totally count those as dark. And with mysteries. You don't know who did what, so you're in the dark. So lots of darkness going on here. On a hike, I did actually take a hike up the hill a little bit to kind of get a feel for, when can I do this? How can I do this? How can I make it work? So I did have the hike and drinking tea almost every night. So there's my cozy cottage. Drinking tea also happened in books. So I didn't have books for on a hike, or not of the ones that I finished. Oh, there was fresh baking in the Heart of the Family. So there's that. And there was a fireplace in George McDonald too, I think. So yeah, mostly I did both, but on a hike only in person. And I'm not sure about mentioning blankets in books, but whatever. So there's the cozy for the Victober. I read the Trollops. They're Victorian. That's it. That's all I did. That's all that counts. For Antober, my books are as follows. I need my glasses to make sure that I read these all correctly, because my brain keeps wanting to go back to last year. So Call Me Anne with an E. It was an ebook. I read Kisseltoe Misses. For Kindred Spirits, a book about a special friendship. I consider the Harry Potters are really great, because there is that really special friendship between the three kids. Yes. But also, in the Curate of Glaston, Thomas Wingfield has beautiful friendships with people, but especially, you have a dwarf man and his daughter. They have a really great relationship. Romantic sensibilities was a romantic way to perish. This is really kind of funny because it doesn't fit, but it does. But Luna Lovegood, to me, is a little bit like the Anne Shirley of the Wizarding World. She, her nargles and Rackspurts and all the things that she has that, it reminds me of Anne creating, a haunted wood and things. And she's highly intelligent, as is Anne. And yet she appears to be lost in her own little dream world and choosing to have such a beautiful outlook on life. She's just a delightful person. And even in some ways, even more in the movies. I think the movies kind of make her out to be more of an airhead, but if you watch the movie through the lens of the book, it's beautiful. And so I'm gonna actually go with that one. There were a couple others that I had thought about, but no. Miss Busby definitely, I would say, has romantic sensibilities because of how she just embraces life and looks on things. But no, we're going with Luna Lovegood on that one. Some books are best left on the shelf. The Curate of Glaston, I finally finished and started it in February. I think that counts, definitely. And I'm just gonna stop there. Mostly because I didn't have time to read anything else that I could pull off the shelf. There were some down here that I really wanted to get to, and I just didn't. So there was that. I exist and read, and so therefore Antobers. Let's see. It's ever so much easier to be good if your clothes are fashionable. I wanted so many things, like the Blooming of Delphinium. I really wanted that to be the cover, but while I started it, I didn't finish it. So I'm going to say of the covers, I do really think that this is a beautiful cover. It's not what I would have chosen to be the cover, for a beautiful cover if I had been able to pick a book to read just on the cover. But it is the most beautiful cover that I read, and it is a beautiful cover. It's just not what I would have chosen. But that's okay. That's okay. And then No Mistakes.
book that takes place in the school. Well, I read an awful lot of Harry Potters. So we're just going to stop there. I don't think any of the other ones actually take place in the school, so I think we're safe there. When Your Imaginations Come True, a Dream Come True novel. Well, Phineas Redux, there are some dreams come true in there, and there are some dreams crushed as well. And then finally, Life is Worth Living as Long as There's a Laugh in It. And for that one, definitely without a doubt, Blood on the Banisters. Benedict Brown, he always makes me laugh. He is so funny. But I have to say, I did laugh at Trollope as well. And obviously, I always laugh in the Harry Potters. So, yeah. So that was my reading. I really wanted to do this book haul, but I think I'll just film it and it'll go up another day because this is already too long. So, yeah. That was October. I feel like I'm back on track. Last night I came in, I sat down, I picked up my book, I started reading, and it felt like normal again. So that was beautiful. And I'm really glad to be back. So yeah, what'd you read? And is there anything in what you read that I need to read? You can tell me what to try? That would be nice. I would appreciate it. So just throwing that out there. But yeah, I hope you just have a great day reading and putting your feet up and cuddling under a blanket with, wind wafting by. Yeah, we're supposed to get some pretty nasty wind. We'll see if it really happens or not. And, yeah, I'll see you later.